Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to this afternoon's presentation. Our keynote speaker is Air Vice Marshal Carl Newman, Royal Australian Air Force, Australian Deputy Commander, U.S. Pacific Air Forces, and Australian Deputy Theater Air Component Commander to the Commander of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. If you wish to learn more about the Air Vice Marshal, you may find his bio in the AFCEA TechNet Indo-Pacific 23 app. If you have any questions for the Air Vice Marshal, please text those to the address located on the screens or email. Apologies. Now finally, please join me in a warm welcome for this afternoon's guest speaker, Air Vice Marshal Carl Newman.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Aloha, and because the Australian in me, I've got to use my own colloquialism. G'day. Thank you for the honour of speaking here today. It truly is a privilege. A definite thank you to Lieutenant General Susan Lawrence, the President of AFCEA, for the invite, and a shout out to Don Cloud Thunder for reaching out to the PACAF headquarters and inviting me here to talk. Why an Australian? Why an Australian standing up here and talking at this from PACAF? I'm very privileged to serve as the Australian Deputy Commander for US Air Forces in the Pacific at PACAF headquarters. I work directly for Lieutenant General Wilsbuck, so while I wear an Australian uniform, I definitely have the US Air Forces hat on. And that just shows how much PACAF, Indo-PACOM in general, value alliances and partnerships. It's just another great example of that. And a strength that we have within our region is the alliances and partnerships, and I'm proud to be a part of that. And that will be part of what I talk about today as we look for technical advantage, making sure that that technical advantage isn't exclusive and that we can bring allies and partners in and leverage any advantage that we get. But I'm also talking today with a little bit of an innovation in technology background. Previous life, I spent 2 years as the director of the Royal Australian Air Force's transformation program called Plan Jericho. A large part of Plan Jericho was establishing an innovation ecosystem with academia, with industry, and with the military to find those next set of technical capabilities that would provide advantage. And so I have a little bit of experience in what I want to talk about. And I want to discuss technical advantage or technology advantage that we can gain that provides the military, particularly the United States and our allies and partners, those capabilities that we'll need to be able to prevail. Those capabilities that will be important to deter, and if deterrence fails and we get to conflict, to win. But before I start off on that, I want to talk about why that military capability advantage is becoming increasingly important. This is a pivotal era that we're in. We're seeing a range of threats across the geopolitical realm. Environmental threats, for one, with climate change. We're seeing health threats through pandemics. But increasingly of concern for this region, it's a pivotal era where we're seeing authoritarian regimes that are seeking to revise and deliberately change and undermine the rules-based global order. That rules-based global order that everyone within the region has benefited from since World War II, that has lifted a number of nations, including those authoritarian regimes, China, North Korea, Russia, that have benefited from that rules-based system. It's an era of increasing great power competition. We're seeing the CCP that has demonstrated an unwavering resolve for their hegemonic aspirations, that their ambitions within the region to be a dominant player is coming, and through their view, is a zero-sum game. They want to win at the expense of others within the region. We need to preserve that rules-based system that lifts everyone rather than one great power at the expense of smaller nations. And to do that, to be able to push back on players, competitors within the region that seek to undermine the system that the global community has embraced, we'll need capability to protect that. We'll need capability that protects our national security interests, regardless of what country we're from within like-minded allies and partners. And we'll need to be able to defend our respective homelands should an actor decide to take an aggressive stance. We'll need to deter that aggression. We'll need strength and be able to portray strength through capability advantage to deter. And as I said, if deterrence fails, we need capability that will allow us to win in any conflict. The great power competition era that we're in is complex. It's dynamic, but it has some defining features. We're facing a pacing challenge, a challenge that's the People's Republic of China, PRC, that has significant resource. They have significant technological capability, and they have an intent to deter and control power projection within the Indo-Pacific. We're in an era of great power competition that brings us to a heightened risk of conflict, and conflict that can occur within an operational timeline that may be outside our control and our choosing. If we find ourselves in conflict in great power competition, and rest assured everything that we're doing at PACAF and within Indo-PACOM here, and indeed allies and partners across the region, is to deter that conflict. But if we do find ourselves in conflict, we face uncertain air, space and cyber superiority in ways that we haven't experienced for decades. We face threats to our installations within the region and our infrastructure that we've not had to deal with for decades. No longer can we, from an Air Force perspective, rely on safe air bases. We face a potential area of operations at a distance from our basing that we've not had to exercise for a long time. And we'll potentially operate in an environment that's highly contested. We'll need to operate in an environment that is becoming increasingly digitised. We're seeing an increasing demand for data and for information, and that demand is generating a volume of data and information that it will require significant effort to rapidly turn that in relevant operational timeframes into useful knowledge. Particularly relevant to this conference, we'll compete in an environment of rapidly changing technology. We're in that environment now. And since World War II, the West has arguably maintained technological advantage and military superiority. We've stayed on top of the military superiority game, by and large, for a number of decades. But our pacing challenge, the PRC, has learnt that game. And in some ways, today, they're playing it better than we are. They've established a research and development capability, an industrial ecosystem that is world-leading in a number of areas. And we see their ability to rapidly iterate on technologies that they've proven and then go on to field. Over the last decade, we've seen the range of PLA anti-access error denial capabilities that's extended by orders of magnitude. They're ballistic missiles across a range of capabilities. They're sophisticated air warfare surface combatants. They're long-range air-to-air and air-to-ground kill chains, complete with a variety of sensors and effectors, all demonstrate our pacing challenge's ability to rapidly field new technology. And they have an authoritarian system that allows them to move at China speed. The PRC or the PLA, they're investing tens of billions of dollars and more solely in AI development and integration as they see what they think might be the next advantage, and are focusing very, very closely an intense amount of resource to achieve that. They're meeting their projections this year for 60 plus space launches and having 200 plus spacecraft. They're producing J-20s, their version of the stealth fighter that they seek to counter the F-22 at over 100 aircraft annually, years ahead of their predicted schedule. Their industrial base is doing some amazing things. So how do we compete with that? How do we, who wish to maintain capability that will deter the pacing challenge from aggressive acts that undermine the rules-based global order that we all rely on, how do we establish capability that projects strength against an adversary that can build capability so quickly? How do we maintain advantage? Well, we've got two options. We can continue what we're doing and pursuing things like the third offset strategy and modernising capability, and we can double down on those capability efforts. We could also change the game. We can make the pacing challenges advantages obsolete by finding the advantage beyond the next one. And I have a view we need to do both. We need to both ameliorate short-term risk by doubling down on what we're currently doing, by accelerating the modernisation of capability that we have within allies and partners across the region. And PACAF is engaged in that, as is Indo-PACOM. In PACAF, we've recently released the PACAF strategy for 2030. It talks about our need to enhance our warfighting advantage. And we will do that. We're rolling out concepts like agile combat employment, where we will have the capability to disperse our forces across the region and to be able to operate at range and in dispersed locations that will make us more difficult to target. We will seek and bring in more modernised weapon systems, both the weapons themselves and the platforms that utilise them. We'll be increasing our air domain awareness through increased sensors across the region, and we will be looking at enhanced joint command and control systems that allow us to more effectively and more optimally utilise the capabilities for maximum effect. The strategy calls out a requirement to advance our theatre posture, and we'll continue to do that to make sure we've got the right capabilities at the right locations at the right time to both compete and, if necessary, win in crisis. We're actively working to strengthen our interoperability with our allies and partners, leveraging one of our key strengths within the region, ensuring we have that interoperability, that we've got the communications architecture, the network and the electronic technical capabilities that allow us to bring allies and partners inside the tent. We cannot be exclusive in the capabilities that we field. And we're taking active steps to shape the information environment. We're having the right sensors in place to capture and record bad behaviour within the region, and then distribute that in a transparent way to call that bad behaviour out and to magnify the good behaviour that's happening within the region. That's how we're doubling down on current capability efforts. But enough people are talking about the things that are happening now to improve military capability within the region. I want to talk about what's next. And that second option, how do we change the game in military advantage? Rather than just try and compete with the PRC and light capabilities, what can we do that gives us advantage? There's a great person, he was an architect and a futurist and a real deep thinker in terms of innovation. Some of you may have heard of him, Buckminster Fuller. And he has this great quote. He said, "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, you need to build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." And I'd like to talk about how we build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete and gives us advantage that will last for a period of time. This has been done post-World War II for numbers of decades. There was the first offset strategy. The first offset strategy put in place because the West needed to counter a Soviet Union that had distinct conventional advantage with the mass that they could bring to any fight. And the West countered that through use of nuclear overmatch. Brought in a technology that made conventional forces obsolete. Changed the game. And that advantage lasted for decades, from about 1945 through to about the early 70s. But over time, as with any advantage, the USSR caught up and established nuclear parity, and that nuclear parity, combined with their conventional force overmatch, started to swing the military advantage out of our favour. It needed a new model to make that model obsolete. In came offset strategy number 2, as we started to seek precision overmatch. Strategy that lasted from the mid-70s through to late 80s, early 90s, where we leveraged technologies like GPS, precision-guided munitions, stealth platforms that allowed us to penetrate complex integrated air and missile defence systems and kinetically target very effectively and efficiently with the numbers of forces that we had that took away USSR conventional overmatch. Gave us advantage. Lasted for about a decade and a half. And those capabilities that came in for that second offset strategy, they were true force multipliers, not just buzzwords. They gave us an advantage over mass. That second offset advantage lay in place until the fall of the Soviet Union. I'd argue that the West believed Francis Fukuyama at the fall of the Soviet Union and believed history was over, and we took our eye off the ball. We went to the Middle East, we engaged in more conventional conflicts, and we weren't looking for the next military advantage against a peer competitor. And that allowed competitors like China to catch up. They found ways of overcoming that second offset strategy. They developed exquisite counter-intervention strategies, very capable anti-access area denial capabilities that eroded our offset advantage. Combined with conventional forces overmatch, starting to swing advantage away from our favour. And that has since triggered, that's been recognised in the last decade as an issue, and the West has been pursuing the third offset strategy. With an initial vector that started as pursuing data overmatch, it's grown to exploit the advantages that are coming through artificial intelligence and autonomy enabled by robust networks. And we're pursuing these capabilities to overwhelm that counter-intervention strategy, provide advantage against the mass. That strategy's been evolving, and I'm very confident that strategy will provide us with the capability that will give us an offset advantage against a peer competitor, against our pacing challenge. I'm confident that trusted autonomy, artificial intelligence, joint command and control network technology will give us the edge. But for how long? And when do we start talking about offset strategy number 4 or 5 or 6? And what I'd like to talk about today is the reason why we need to have those conversations now. Because there's a feature of offset strategies. Each offset strategy's effect is trending to last far less than its last iteration. Nuclear overmatch, decades. Stealth and precision, shorter period again. I'd argue that trusted autonomy, network, and AI may very well last for a shorter period again. And so we need to be constantly thinking about what's next. The advantages that are coming in those offset strategies previously were from technology that was strongly controlled by governments. The advantages we'll see into the future are increasingly from commercially available technologies. That's allowing a lower cost of entry for adversaries, allowing them to gain the same technology at a rapid pace. And that's why I think we will see continued trend of technological advantage becoming shorter and shorter in terms of temporal timeframes. There's still a place for nuclear deterrent and the capability we gained through offset advantage number one, there's still a place for precision long-range strike combined with stealth. When the third offset strategy is truly achieved, I think there'll be a place for massed, trusted autonomy driven by artificial intelligence. But if these advantages are only lasting for a decreasing amount of times, it's imperative that we seek beyond the horizon solutions and we start those conversations now. What is beyond the horizon? What will be offset strategy number 4? What gives us technical advantage in the year 2050 and the next one in 2055 and the next one in 2056? I've worked in the innovation sphere for a few years. I've dealt with and delved into academic institutions. I've seen what industry is producing. I've talked with the defence ecosystem, and I can tell you with certainty, I have no idea what the next advantage will be. Maybe it's the advent of general artificial intelligence. Maybe it's a pervasive global network of sensors where an adversary will be able to or not be able to hide their intentions. Maybe it's directed energy strikes that can happen at the speed of light. Maybe it's overmatched offensive or defensive cyber capabilities that can overwhelm an adversary. It could be some of those things combined, or it could be none of them. But I will say, whatever the advantage is, it'll be a combination of science and technology and concepts and systems, some of which we've already started to ideate and some of which haven't even been thought about yet. Whatever it is, I can give you my view of what the criteria will be that we will need to maintain advantage into the future. Any capability advantage needs to be inherently multi-domain. It needs to be able to work with and through air, sea, land, cyber and space, and integrate with capabilities across all those domains. The capabilities need to be able to perform at scale, in a massed environment, in contested environments, and they need to be resilient, to be able to operate despite the contest. They need to provide seamless, sustainable operations beyond the horizon at wicked tempo. That's the nature that at least the initial phases of any conflict will occur. They need to be highly adaptable and useful for a range of scenarios, both through the entire spectrum of competition and interconflict, that can respond to a highly dynamic geopolitical environment. And they need to be capable of being employed with allies and partners. I can't foot stomp that enough as the Australian in the room in a different uniform working in the United States headquarters. Able to work with allies and partners that we recognise today and we know will be with us, but also capable of working with allies and partners that we may not know will be there with us until very late in the piece. All I know for certain is whatever the new capability that comes down needs to meet that criteria and change the game in a way that will give us overmatch. So how do we get there? Offset strategies, technical advantage. They need an innovation ecosystem. Every innovation, every military advantage that we have gained came from an ecosystem that combined defence users with academia and industry, working together to solve common problems. The balance between those three elements has changed over the years. Nuclear technology, even technology like the internet, which underpins some of our network capability, Wi-Fi, came out of government institutions, highly controlled. Governments have far less sway in the technology capability that's being developed today and will be in the future. They're no longer the monopoly of good ideas. Actually, did I just say government had a monopoly on good ideas? I apologise. They probably never did. But we're seeing greater capacity of, and we will need the capacity of, industry and academia to increasingly take the lead, particularly industry. And a great example of that is Starlink and how it's being utilised by the Ukraine today to push back against unwanted, unjust and immoral Russian aggression. There is an industry developing a capability that provided significant advantage. The offset strategy ecosystem, that advantage ecosystem, needs to work in an enmeshed way. Those three elements, government, defence, academia and industry, need to work collectively together. Academia will provide the new theories, the science and some of the application, and they'll initiate the new technology research and developments. We need to bring three elements together that nurtures and encourages that ideation. Industry is going to be the bridge. Industry is the one that will bring that new science to realisation, but will also inspire that research that comes out of academia. Industry will understand the problem sets and will need to be the ones that shape and then see opportunity that's coming out of academia and be ready to industrialise that research and development and bring capabilities to the fore and seek ways of continuing to improve that capability. And defence and government will continue to provide the sense makers, the operators, the ones who are experiencing problems at the coalface, the ones who can bring those problem statements and encourage and support R&D to get after those thorny, knotty problems that we have, the ones that will set capability requirements as TRLs mature on promising designs. We need to, as defence, ensure we exploit the ecosystem, and as capability is provided, we're looking at ways not just to deliver the effects that are promised, but seeking new tactics and training and procedures that will leverage a great deal more advantage out of the capability that is delivered that was ever envisaged. And there's an overlap between the three. We can't do that work in our own silos. This conference is a prime example of the ecosystem that we need. Bringing together the sense makers, bringing together academia, bringing together industry to allow us to have the informal conversations where we can talk to each other and not past each other and not remain in our own silos. It's when we come together for more of those conversations, we'll achieve the ideation that might be the breakthrough for the next advantage and the next. When it's just us informally in situations like this and collaboratively, we can avoid the concerns of the ivory tower. We can bypass some of the bureaucracy. We can overcome some of the issues of probity and IP or concerns of shareholders and have true conversations that will develop the next advantage. That's the strength that this type of event will provide. And the answer for what is beyond the third offset strategy, whenever that comes, I know that it will not be immediately fieldable. It will take time to build that advantage. And because the third offset strategy will last for less time, we need to be having the conversations now, in rooms like this, in conferences like this, and establish the networks that are required to ideate the next capability advantages, the next technological advantages. Please, for all of you in the audience, keep working on the third offset strategy. I need trusted autonomy. PACAF needs it. The region needs it. We need the artificial intelligence algorithms that will help us mass autonomous capabilities. We will need to be able to leverage the data that gives us decision superiority and allows us to generate the right effect at the right time in space that overwhelms an adversary. Please keep working on that. But at the same time, have the conversations as to what are those ideas coming through that will give the United States and its allies and partners and like-minded folks who value the rules-based global order, the ability to deter those that wish to undermine it, that keep peace and stability and security within our region that we've all benefited from over the last 50 or 60 years. And once you figure out what those great ideas are for the advantage after next, come and let us know. We'll have those conversations and we'll be ready to start the conversation for what's the advantage after next, so that we can always stay ahead and we don't drop the ball and we don't believe Francis Fukuyama and that history has ended. We need to maintain that advantage so that we can always protect those things that we hold dear, both in the United States and with our allies and partners. So thank you for the opportunity to talk about the ecosystem that we need. It is important, but I look forward to any questions that folks may have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to remind our audience that we are accepting questions at askmeindopac@gmail.com. So the first audience question, are you able to, or can you expand on some of the initiatives or mechanisms that are in place to ensure effective communication and information sharing among coalition members?
Oh, first and foremost, that's a really good question. And first and foremost, the key to any innovation ecosystem is the ability to communicate. It's not just between coalition members. I've seen the inability to communicate between industry partners because of IP and shareholder concerns. I've seen the inability of academia to talk to each other because of competition and the desire to publish first. Then military to military conversations get drawn into security classifications and concerns. We need an ecosystem that can cut through that. When it comes to information sharing amongst coalition members, I am proof that it can be done. If PACAF can pull an Australian, a foreign military officer into their headquarters and I get access to a large percentage of what goes on, there are some things that, quite rightly, nations will want to protect for themselves, but that's becoming increasingly less. We need to have the conversations based around risk. What is the risk of sharing, but offset that against what's the risk of not sharing? What are the opportunities we will not generate if we don't share? Increasingly within the region, Indo-PACOM is setting a good framework. We don't have a security framework like Europe. And I don't think that that's right for this region. But we are having a number of forums that are standing up, an enmeshed network of allies and partners, whether it's AUKUS or the Quad or Japan, Korea, United States trilateral, that are starting to build. And the conversations are occurring. What is the risk of not sharing this information? What won't we achieve? Rather than a traditional focus of what do we have to protect? Those are the conversations that are needed and I think are happening from a military to military, and I strongly encourage it across an innovation ecosystem. Always be identifying what are the risks of not sharing. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, sir. The next audience question, can you share any of your thoughts on how our partner countries could respond or should respond to China's cognitive and intelligence warfare in the Indo-Pacific area?
Every country's reaction to whatever a competitor might be doing within our region comes down to their own national interests, but also a shared collective interest. We're seeing a large number of allies and partners within our region that are recognising the value of a rules-based global order. The peace and stability that has provided, that has driven economic benefit, prosperity benefit, and lifted all within the region. A system that isn't zero-sum game. And so when we see competitors that are seeking to change that, I think whether it's the United States, whether it's another nation within the region, they're considering from their own interests what measured responses they can take. And I see that happening across the region. Each country will have its own nuanced way of dealing with that and how they communicate that. Certainly within PACAF and with Indo-PACOM, we will continue to encourage partners to call out bad behaviour. And we will do that ourselves. And that comes to how do we sense and record bad behaviour, and how are we transparent in how we promulgate that out into the environment? How do we call out that bad behaviour? And that's what we would encourage all partners to do where they see it, to take the steps to be transparent and call out that behaviour. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next question from the audience. Could you share what you see as the one or two biggest benefits and challenges of serving as an embedded Australian officer in a US military command?
And the biggest benefit is I get to live in Hawaii. That's an awesome benefit. It's not true. A fantastic opportunity for me individually, but more importantly, it is further cementing a deep and long-standing relationship that Australian military has had with the United States military, and our two countries have had together. We have fought side by side since World War I, and pretty much every conflict since. There are no two countries that are more deeply connected when it comes to military relations. And that doesn't mean we can't get better. Having officers like myself serve with PACAF and having other officers embedded within the headquarters and a range of liaison officers, both across Army, Navy and Air Force, in with space and cyber capabilities, will help us understand each other so that we're not working out how to work together in times of crisis. We've already established what each other's intent is, what the capabilities are, and how we can move from, and I would say we're moving from being interoperable to almost being interchangeable. Where an Australian F-35 can operate as part of a coalition force ship. 3 United States, 1 Australian F-35, seamless. That's where we're getting to. And that's the value of having embedded officers within United States military commands, and vice versa. Seek to have United States experience in Australia so that we learn even more about each other. And in PACAF, we're encouraging as many countries as wish to send their officers to our headquarters to develop a deeper understanding of how PACAF will do business and to teach us how we can do business better to integrate with them.
Thank you, sir. We focus a lot on the innovation ecosystem. We spend a lot of money every year on we've got DoD labs, S&T incubation investments, and we're having one of our bigger problems here that still remains is a poor transition to scale and sustainability. What can we do differently?
The Valley of Death is an amazing thing. I have seen it in numerous circumstances, but we have to be able to fail. And sometimes some things will not make it through the Valley of Death. If we rapidly prototype, experiment, and continue to iterate capabilities to be able to showcase what they can do, they will either reach a point where we determine they're not the next advantage and we need to cut them away quickly, or they are the next advantage and we get on and invest in them. I can't talk too much about the US system, but in the Australian environment, I strongly encourage that we have the investment mechanisms that can pull some of those capabilities through. And the way we will do that, and I think this is true of the United States as well, if we have more or early input from the user right at the beginning that defines a good set of problems and stays engaged with the innovation development as it works its way through the life cycle. And it's innovation that is focused not for just being innovative, but for solving some of those thorny problems and will provide true capability advantage to the end user, then they will have greater chance of being pulled across that valley and being developed into something at scale and provides us that next advantage. That said, within the innovation system, I would expect 90% of things at the outset not to be pulled through. If we're not failing at a high rate, we're not exploring all of the areas and we are likely to miss the next opportunity. And we just have to have a system that is tolerant of failure, ready to find that very next thing that will provide us advantage for a number of years.
Thank you, sir. We have time for one more question. Space operations have begun to play a pivotal role in warfare. Will allies be prepared to expand and invest in space capabilities to ensure advancements continue?
100%, and we're already seeing it across the region. The entry cost to space is much lower than it's ever been, and I expect the cost will continue to go down. Some of the more exquisite capabilities may be outside some of the allies and partners within the region, but microsatellites, LEO, launch capabilities are increasingly becoming accessible, both from a commercial perspective and for defence. We're seeing launch capabilities in countries like New Zealand. Recently, my Prime Minister visited the United States and an announceable that came out from his visit to the White House was expanded US reach into Australia for launch locations and Australian companies. We're seeing countries like Korea that will be launching satellites from SpaceX rocket capabilities. So that's definitely going to expand across the region, and it will be key. Space is a critical domain, one that we need to both protect and exploit, and one I think will be pivotal in ensuring we've got that network capability and sets of capabilities that set us up for military advantage into the future. And I recognise that was the last question, so I thank everyone for their interest. Some really deep and insightful questions, and I really do appreciate the opportunity to talk today. Thank you.
Please welcome Colonel Mike Black, U.S. Air Force retired, Vice President for Defense, AFCEA International, to the stage.
Well, Air Vice Marshal Newman, on behalf of AFCEA Hawaii and AFCEA International, I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us today and providing this very informative keynote. You talked about our strength of our alliances and partnerships. You mentioned your Plan Jericho experience, and that's a nice complement to what we're doing here with our allies. You also talked about why we need to maintain that military capability and that advantage to preserve the rule-based systems. You also talked about our capability that will allow us to win any conflict, and those two options of doubling down and then changing the game in the military advantage and building that new model that makes the existing model obsolete. And finally, you talked about keep working on that third offset strategy, and what the risk of sharing versus the risk of not sharing and how important that is. As a thank you to our speakers, on behalf of AFCEA, we're providing a donation in your name to the Friends of Windward Wounded Warriors, and it will be made again in your name. In addition, I've got 2 coins that I'm going to present to you, and I'll ask you to move to the center of the stage so we can do it for a picture. But we have 1 coin for the 38th TechNet Indo-Pacific, and 1 coin highlighting the 70th anniversary of AFCEA Hawaii. And finally, I'll ask our MC, Captain Place, to come up and just highlight what we have going on the rest of the day. Again, thank you, Air Marshal.
And thanks, folks. For those that didn't understand the broad Australian accent, there'll be a translation online later on.
All right.
Once again, thank you, Air Vice Marshal Newman, for an excellent presentation. Now, before you all get out of here, here's a few admin remarks. First, the SD-Free IT Corporation is providing parking validation at booth 416. Please stop by and get your parking validated by 4 p.m., or you can decide to pay downtown parking fees. Also, please refer to the AFCEA Indo-Pacific 2023 TechNet app for this afternoon's events, which include a 1400 panel moderated by Rear Admiral Thomas Hinderset, Intelligence Directorate J2, U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, titled Threats, Challenges, and Opportunities. Also, be sure to visit the STEM Innovation Room, supported by Dell Technologies, where you will find many of our future industry leaders, engineers, and scientists showing off their technological creations. Finally, if you're not an AFCEA member and wish to join, please visit the AFCEA membership booth just outside the South Pacific Ballroom exhibit floor. This concludes our presentations. You are free.